Okay, I want to brag just a little bit, and we're going to talk to Mike. But I just got to tell you, I got some information about Church Answers podcast, and we're continuing to just see God bless this podcast, and what I mean by more and more audience coming to it. That excites me not for the numerical value, but that excites me for the influence. And what we try to do at Church Answers podcast is we are a practical ministry podcast, and we try to share practical ministry information. And one of the things that comes up all the time is a church facility. Now, someone will say to us, the church is not a building; it's the people of God. Yeah, but the people of God got to meet somewhere. So that's what the building is all about. We've been talking about this building. We looked at what do you do if you have just a whole lot of repairs and maintenance to do? That's called deferred maintenance. What if you have a lot of debt and you need to just get rid of all or most of that debt? And now we're going to be talking about, okay, if it's time to build something, how do we fund it? Well, we're going to get the answers to that. We've already gotten them in 2 previous episodes, so I encourage you to go to those, and the show notes that are there, I'll have the link to it. And we also have testimonials from 3 different churches. We'll talk about these 3 different areas: deferred maintenance, debt reduction, and new building. And if you've listened or watched the first 2, you know that we have Mike Stadelmayer of the leadership of Church Growth Services. Mike, as always, we love having the relationship with you, but I love the fact that we get to talk about things that directly impact the local church. And thank you for being with us.
Man, it's great to be here. Hi, Church Answers family. Love being a part of the family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so episode 1 of these 3, we talked about deferred maintenance and how you can just have a joyous time watching God take care of that. And Mike has seen it again and again. In the over half century, his company has been doing this type of stewardship, fundraising, generosity for churches. And then we looked at the second episode, debt reduction. Mike talked about the heavy burden or cloud that debt often brings, because every dollar spent for principal or interest in debt repayment is something that could go toward ministry or perhaps even new staffing. And then this one is the one that many people say, oh, it's a generosity firm. They're talking about building buildings. Yes, they do. But that's not all that they talk about. But that's why we wanted to get the other 2 first. But they are the ones who help you get the funding to build that building. Mike, I didn't prepare you for this, but just kind of a side note. Do you have any stories over all these years of a strange facility you built, or something that perhaps you have not done in other situations? Again, if you don't have it, fine. But I'm just curious.
Well, I've seen some strange facilities that you wonder what were they thinking, but and just in the way they were laid out, or those kinds of things, and certainly a lot of old facilities that have 100-year-old and they've had add-ons to add-ons, and it's almost like a maze.
But no 300-foot prayer towers or anything like that.
Nothing like that.
All steps, no elevator. Well, Mike is going to talk to us about raising funds or getting the funding for new buildings. It's a very practical information. That's why I'm always glad to have him on. Let me just remind you, go to the show notes, Church Growth Services. Go to the show notes also, because you'll see a link where you can find out. It's a calculator to help you find out how much you can raise and the possibilities there. Mike's going to be talking about hope. And also you can learn about the other areas, deferred maintenance and debt reduction, in the previous 2 episodes. So we just wanted to give you that information. Mike, there's so many paths that you could go down talking about raising funds for new buildings, but I'll let you have it at this point.
Yeah, this one's in the early stages is a little easier. You get some pretty pictures from a guy like Todd Brown in church development, and you see these nice, pretty pictures, and so it's a little more inspirational than fixing the leaking roof or repairing the bare bones carpet. And so vision's a little bit easier, but construction costs are high, and a lot of projects don't get built. 50% of the projects that get drawn don't get built because they don't keep in balance cost with facility with ministry needs, the golden triangle we call it. And but boy, it can really take a church that already has momentum and accelerate. It's like pouring fuel on the fire, And it wasn't that long ago, Pastor Chris at City Church gave us a call. And Thom, God was just doing something really unique in this church. They were a 5-year-old church running 750.
Wow, where's it located?
in Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Okay.
and they were in temporary facilities. They brought in a strategic growth consultant to look at their staff and at their growth and everything. And he came back and he says, "Man, there's so many good things happening here, but I got to tell you, I'd never come to this church." And the pastor was like, "Well, why?" He goes, "Because of your rented facilities and the way you're laid out. The only security you have for your children is I trust in Jesus."
Oh, wow. That is not
And
good.
so in spite of their growth, they had some really issues, but they had an old grocery store warehouse they had purchased, but it was really old and needed a lot of work. And so they called us and they said, "Okay, we bought the facility, but now we got to do all this renovation, all this work to get into our own facility." And the price tag was pretty high.
Sure.
And but they were growing exponentially. And this, in the middle of this, was the pandemic.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
we did an assessment early on, and we learned 64% of their congregation was under the age of 34.
That's not a lot of money in that.
There's not a lot of money in that. And 50% of them had been there less than a year.
Wow.
And so that changed the way we did the campaign, because you got to know your church, the culture, and what's happening in the church in order how to be really effective in a campaign. And we always do an early assessment so we know that church culture and those dynamics. But they had a big need. And so Pastor Chris was a great leader, really cast vision well, challenged his people. We focused in and prayed. It was called Immeasurably More, right out of Ephesians. God can do immeasurably more than we can ask or hope. And they came together, and those young families were sacrificial. There weren't a lot of those Timothy 6 donors in the building, kind of thing, where God says, "Challenge those who are rich in this world." Well, there weren't many in that building to challenge, but you know what? The widow's mite is also powerful.
It
When
is.
God's people place their gifts before the Lord by faith, He can do great and wondrous things. And that campaign was just so blessed, and the church grew spiritually. And just as importantly, those young families were discipled in the grace of giving. And it was just such a powerful thing to watch and see, as God was already working, as He always is. But it was just exponential in
So
this case.
I understand that they were in a facility that wasn't designed to be a church, and understood that it needed a lot of work. What specifically did they build or rebuild or remodel in the context of all of this?
Yeah, they had to do everything from a sanctuary to office space to children's ministry space that actually had security and sign-ins and things, and actually was meant to be that space. It was just a few months ago. I was talking to Pastor Chris, and he said, "Mike, it's been a year and a half into our campaign. It's going well. Things are going good. And 4 weeks ago, we moved into our facility."
Wow.
And he said, "It has just been immeasurably more." He said, "For the first 4 weeks, we're running 1,900 plus,
My
4 weeks in a
goodness.
row."
And this church is what, 7 years old, 8 years
It's
old?
about 7 years old now. Yeah. And sometimes that spiritual jumpstart, and that people just really reconnecting to the vision, and sacrificing, and God just saw their heart and blessed them. And boy, they're seeing so many young people come. They're multi-ethnic, they're multi-economic.
Hmm.
They are just a great picture of what heaven's going to look like.
Mm. So we have been through in 3 episodes talking about great hope in the midst of deferred maintenance, a lot of repairs and things that needed to be done in the church. We've talked about a great hope at Hope Church in debt reduction. And now we're talking about great hope in new facilities, renovated facilities, those type of things that are capital related. And there's this common theme going through all of it. There's the hope of God in all of these. And that's what you've been telling us, Mike, that this is not this arduous process that you just have to get through. This is an act that God is in, that you can worship and rejoice in the midst of all of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I said it before in one of the earlier podcasts. I've got a great job because I see God work all over this country, in denominations all across this country, in rural churches, small churches, to the large churches. Man, I get inspired to go to work every day because working for the Bride of Christ, seeing God do wonderful things. He's still doing miracles today, and I'm just privileged to be a part of that journey in supporting churches and pastors. And I really want to encourage that deferred maintenance, pastor, because there's probably more churches listening that have deferred maintenance issues
Exactly.
than anything. In that church that I pastored that was underwater financially, that meant their maintenance wasn't keeping up. And it was like whack-a-mole. We were always constantly trying to put duct tape on things. And, when you can do a deferred maintenance kind of thing or debt or even new building, whatever it is, and get over top of it, and you're not playing catch up all the time.
Right.
And you're not focusing on it all the time. You're focusing on what you really want to become a pastor in church to do, spreading the word and reaching your community. It is so freeing to be able to do that. And it takes some work. But pastor, don't be afraid of it, because it can be an accelerator to your church and your ministry.
And pastor, or whoever's listening and may have any type of input into decisions like this, visit Church Growth Services. Talk to Mike Stadelmayer, talk to his team, and you're going to be blessed, because they have seen things take place that only can be described as a work of God, whether it's deferred maintenance, debt reduction, or doing something with or to a new facility. And so look at that calculator on there so you can see, okay, maybe how much can we raise? And then look at the link to Church Growth Services as well. And look at the 3 links that are in there to the testimonials about pastors and churches who've gone through each of these that Mike has alluded to. Well, Mike, this has been a good 3-part episode, very practical, but at the same time, very inspirational. And that's kind of what you do, and that's kind of who you are. So before we leave the whole podcast episode, I'll give you the last word, except for me wrapping this up or trying to put a bow on it.
Yeah. You know what? There's no perfect circumstances. And so many times we want to wait for the perfect circumstance before we do something like a generosity campaign, because it's a lot of work, and the church has to commit some resources to it. But pastor, don't wait for the perfect circumstances. There's no such thing. We're in a fallen world. But man, taking those steps of faith, leading with confidence and boldness, can really just energize your church. So many side benefits come from these generosity initiatives, from spiritual growth to renewed energy in the church and momentum, to reconnecting to the vision of the church and its purpose. I am so privileged to work with churches all across this country, and faithful men and women of God, and faithful pastors that really want to see lives change for all eternity. It's just a blessing.
Mike, you've been a blessing to be here. Listen to all 3 episodes. If you haven't, you may be on your 3rd one by listening to this. Or if you're on YouTube, watch us there. Hey, for you YouTubers, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, put it where you can hear from us on a regular basis. You don't have to wait and click on YouTube to go find us. Just subscribe and tell people about us as well. For those of you on your favorite podcasting app, give us a rating and review. Let the world know we are here to provide this free ministry because of people like Church Growth Services, who is our partner in ministry. To all of you who are looking at raising funds for deferred maintenance, for debt, for some new facility, remodel facility, make sure you contact Church Growth Services. Mike Stadelmayer and his team are waiting for you. And listen to those testimonies, because here's what you will be reminded of. You might not think you can do it, but God always can do it. That is the hope we have, and that is the promise he makes us. Thank you for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. Thank you for being a part of this listening audience and viewing audience. Mike, thank you for being a part of these 3 episodes as well. And we'll see you or hear from you on the next episode of the Church Answers podcast.